As above, so below, as within, as without. Welcome to Wheel of Ezekiel Astrology Podcast. In this episode number 24, I will be presenting about the astrology of synastry. It is one of the most practical branches of relationship astrology, and unlike the composite chart, which merges two natives' charts together into one, the synastry chart is composed of superimposing two charts over each other, which then it can be read in light of what points are matched, what conducive aspects are being made between both charts, which will then give clear insights as to whether or not these two individuals are compatible or not. So to begin, the most important thing to look at in these two charts is the sun and the moon's relationship between both natives. This will indicate whether or not there is any kind of deeper connection, really, because of what the symbolism of the sun and the moon. The sun being the soul, the ego identity, the major part of the personality that is expressed as one shines. Whereas the moon is more of one's thoughts, emotions, instincts, and the way that one processes the outside world. So, as one can see, if these two are not making a meaningful aspect, it is unlikely that there will be a meaningful connection between both individuals. Additionally to this, an astrologer will examine the Mars and Venus in each chart as well as the other placements. All the other planets are looked at to see in what aspects they are in with each other. The aspects that these make will determine the quality of synastry. The sign the sun and moon fall in will be of importance to note, as well as the sign of the ascendant. So a very positive combination would be, let's say, person A's sun sign is the same as person B's ascendant sign, or vice versa. This would also work well with the moon, given that the moon and the ascendant are a shared sign between both people. I think it's probably pretty clear why, that the ascendant being the most important point in the chart that resonates with who an individual is, how a person sees themselves, and thus also sees the world and is seen by others. And then the moon and the other person would be what I just explained earlier. So them sharing that same sign energy would be a major indicator that there's some good synastry, good energy between the two. So let's see, lots of trines and lots of sextiles are very good, very, very positive. The trine is the 120 degree based aspect, though you can also look at sign based aspects that are just based on the element. So a fire sign will make a trine to the other two fire signs wherever you start. Or the same for air, water, earth. Yeah, all of them. Essentially, it's important to note, though, the degrees, because that will indicate how much more, I guess, precise or intense, you could say, that the actual aspect will be in effect. I mean, if it's down to the exact degree, then that's incredibly positive and really, really something to note. So then the sextile is having a positive aspect between two signs that are of a different element, but still either both masculine or either both feminine. Say, for example, a fire sign to an air sign or a water sign to an earth sign. That's, like I said, a 60-degree aspect, so 2 signs over. And again, it can be either sign-based or degree-based. The square, which is a 90-degree aspect, will indicate a point of tension, and the planets involved will give further insight into the tension of that dynamic. Say, for example, person A's Mercury is square to person B's Jupiter. This could signify that person A's intellect, manner of communication, and rational faculties is in disagreement with person B's ethics, beliefs, and the way in which they give meaning and order to the world. That's what Jupiter does. And then person A would be more left brain. Person B would be more right brain in that case. You know, Mercury and Jupiter can have that distinction. Mercury is more about the fine details, and Jupiter is more about the big picture, more about spiritual things that have a deeper, profound meaning, I guess, that's beyond what's calculable, I guess. Mercury is much more about just things you can measure and calculate. But of course, there's other mitigating factors to look at that'll balance out the harmonious and the disharmonious aspects. So then next we look at the oppositions. These can be very interesting because they can kind of go both ways. As much as they signify tension on some level, it can also signify attraction, as 2 forces essentially pulling in opposite directions, like a string on a musical instrument that's tightened just right so that it actually makes music. 2 people having that fine-tuned tension opposition, interesting things can happen, let's say. It's very dynamic, of course. Also, having 2 different points of view can be very enhancing to perspective as a whole in the relationship. So let's say having an opposing sun and moon, provided there are no hard aspects to the luminaries, could really complement the dynamic of a synastry chart. It's important to remember the signs come in pairs, really. So there's 12 signs, and there's also just 6 pairs that are polarities. Each one correcting and balancing the flaws or deficiencies in the other. Like take, for example, Aries and Libra. Aries is very action-prone, straightforward, but sometimes lacking in diplomacy and tact. Libra, on the other hand, excels at diplomacy, but is also a bit indecisive at times and can shy away from taking action or making decisions. So in this dynamic, one can learn from the other. Then lastly, we look at the conjunctions, which technically aren't an aspect, but they're very important to look at, and because of the fusion of energy that is implied with two planets, objects, or points occupying the exact same degree or within a 3 to 5 degree orb range. Pretty much, it can be a bit wider for some planets, depending, but usually the 3 to 5 is what I think is a good estimate. This can be very powerful. So it's particularly with the luminaries, it indicates very strong resonance and alignment of energies, having one person's sun and one person's moon conjunct, or both suns or both moons, right? That could also equally be as powerful, and and slightly interpreted differently. And of course, you have to look at the context of the whole chart, even what sign it's in, and the ruler of that sign and where that's at. So not get into all that. I'm not going into specifics right now, but just as a general evaluation protocol, look at these things I'm saying here. Now with malefics, Saturn and Mars, things can get a bit more complicated. An example would be person A's Mars conjunct person B's moon. This can indicate person A is perceived as insensitive by person B. Or person A, conversely, may perceive person B to be too sensitive or perhaps to not understand them, to misunderstand them and their assertiveness and their way of acting. Um, in general, it signifies emotional hurt, as in this case, Mars burns the moon. Mars is very hot and the moon is very cool. So, they don't make a good combination really in any real sense. They're pretty antithetical. So again, that's not a make or break necessarily, but generally speaking, that's not something that would at least be looked at as a positive aspect in a synastry chart. So with Saturn, then, there's the challenge of restriction or limitation. For example, person A's Saturn conjunct person B's ascendant. Person A may disapprove of person B's worldview or appearance. Or conversely, person B may find person A controlling, old-fashioned, and narrow-minded. There are cases, though, in which Saturn and Venus dynamics, for example, are very significant and indicating an age gap, but also a mutual appreciation for traditional ways, as well as beauty and love of classic or antique things. A special kind of bond, essentially, is signified here, where the age difference, indicated by Saturn, actually becomes the unifying factor, which is Venus. This is not limited, of course, to the conjunction, as the opposition or the trine could also indicate this similar kind of dynamic between natives. I have an example I'm going to show later where this dynamic actually shows. I also need to mention the aspects to the lot of fortune, which are also highly significant. So the lot of fortune carries this. It's an actual mathematical point. Actually, it's not an actual object. It's calculated from measuring the distance in just a singular native chart from either the sun to the moon by day or from the moon to the sun by night. This is the doctrine of sect. And then you project that same distance from the ascendant. And I did a whole episode on the lots with Olivia Solner, if you wish to go back and watch that. So the lot of fortune being a point of destiny, essentially your lot in life, your fortune, not necessarily good or bad, but just things that are circumstantial that you're born into. If two people have their lot of fortunes conjunct in a synastry chart, that would be highly indicative that both paths of both natives were essentially destined to cross on some level. You could read that way. Or that they both have a very similar vocation in life, because it's also about what you do materially, like in terms of vocation, not necessarily a career, but what mission you're here to do. But it's really more the material circumstances about how you do it. So in terms of a lifestyle, two people with lots of fortune conjunct would be well aligned to live a life together. So the next point I need to mention is conjunctions to the angles of the chart, which can be very, very powerful, especially by the angle ruler. So the angles in the chart are the ascendant-descendant axis, which mark the cusps of the first house and the seventh house, and then also the MC and the IC, which mark the cusps of the 10th house and the 4th house. So for example, say someone has Pisces on the cusp of the 7th house, and then the other person has Jupiter conjunct that angle. This would be especially potent since Jupiter is also the ruler of Pisces, and hence of that particular angle in the other person's chart. So basically, then the archetype of Jupiter would likely be embodied by that person conjoining the angle, and the other person would be drawn to them for these Jupiterian qualities. Any planet conjunct an angle is powerful, but as I showed in this case, particularly the planet that rules that angle. So, for that, you just have to know your sign rulerships. And it's pretty easy to figure out. So another example for romantic dynamics, speaking of conjunction to angles, it would be Mars conjunct the IC, which indicates strong sexual attraction. Venus too conjunct the IC can indicate a strong emotional connection, feelings of love within a romantic or family dynamic, and a sense of security. The IC is the most private point in a chart. It really represents that innermost part of self. It's a very sacred place that really very rarely anyone else will know of a native unless one really trusts someone to allow them into that space. But it's um, a very private place, very sensitive, I'd say too. It has to do with our deeper emotions. In the natural zodiac, it would correspond to where the sign of Cancer begins as the fourth sign, but generally the fourth house connecting to family, to roots, to one's lineage as well. So it's a very personal point. So, right, Mars or Venus or any other planet that just chose to bring those out, particularly because for relationships, those two are accentuating that. Sun or Moon too, of course, but Sun or Moon conjunct to any angle is going to be very significant, and you'll just read it within the context of the broader charts. All right, and then now also a few strong signs of a genuine bond would be having the same planetary chart ruler. This is usually the ascendant ruler. So that doesn't mean the two people have to have the same ascendant. Say that, one person has Virgo rising, the other person has Gemini rising. They both would be ruled by Mercury. So they would both share a sign ruler. You could also look at this as the sun sign ruler, though I prefer to look at the ascendant because I think that the ruler of the nativity is going to be the ruler of the first house. So that would be the ascendant. Though definitely sharing a sign ruler, a sun or moon ruler as well would be important and certainly noteworthy. And then conjunctions between the sun and moon are certainly indicators of a dynamic of trust and intimacy, a mutual understanding. Having the same planet conjunct in a chart. So let's say in a Synastry chart, Mars is conjunct Mars, which indicates a strong physical attraction as well as a powerful connection with both partners sharing similar combinations and assertiveness. Desires and drives are aligned closely, which can lead to a dynamic and energetic relationship. It can also, however, indicate conflicts that arise through this shared energy and also result in competitiveness. Right, you have Mars essentially right on this exact same degree. There's going to be probably a sense of competition. It could be healthy competition. I mean, that does exist in a certain dynamic, but if it's not, if there's no precautions taken, that could easily erupt into something more negative, perhaps. But it's certainly going to be a very fiery, very passionate. It's going to show a lot of resonance, a lot of energy. Certainly very energetic. I could see two people that are into a lot of like outdoor physical activities, like becoming like hiking buddies and going out or doing very Mars things, risky things, things that demand a lot of strength and courage to do. Unlikely you'd find two homebodies that would have Mars conjunct Mars. So it could happen, and then that could lead to other interesting things as well. So who knows? Now let's see. I want to go into some example charts. So, gonna switch my screen now. Let's see. Stop sharing for a moment. All right. So the chart that you're seeing here on screen is the Synastry chart of Denzel Washington and his wife, Pauletta Pearson Washington. I didn't really want to put any particular celebrity couple on a pedestal, so I kind of chose a couple that I felt, wasn't as, flashy, if you will, and, full of drama and all that. That's not how I wanted to proceed with this. They've been married for 43 years, a bit more quiet. And so, okay, let's begin. The inner circle is Denzel Washington's chart, and then the outer circle here is going to be his wife, Pauletta. So he has his sun here in Capricorn, and her sun is in Virgo. Both being earth signs are making a sign-based trine. Also, because they're both earth signs, that indicates that they're both very practical, down-to-earth people. It also kind of indicates longevity in a sense that been able to make it last for this long. They're having a very sensible way about going about their relationship that wasn't all fire. They just in passion that burns out, or purely sentimental water, or just purely air that is just about ideas and kind of illusions, maybe. Not to say that they don't work, but I just noticed that earth signs maybe have a quality to them that is more long-lasting in a sense. But yeah, so I said before, the sun is the most important thing to look at, and then the moon. And in this case, they don't have the moon in an aspect that's, visible here. It's not one of the Ptolemaic aspects anyways. But that's not really anything to be concerned about either way. It doesn't have to match up on everything. They're not making a hard aspect anyway, so it's not indicating that there's any misunderstanding between both of them. The next thing to look at then would be her sun is conjunct his lot of fortune. Like I mentioned before, the lot of fortune being a very important point. So even in this case, it's not the lot of fortune conjunct the lot of fortune. Any other object conjoining a lot is important, because the lots themselves don't make aspects, but other planets can make connections with them. So in this case, that shows that there's that alignment between kind of their destinies and their life paths, aligning in that exact same degree here in early Virgo. Anyway, then next also let's look at this Venus conjunct Pluto. Well, she has natal Venus and Pluto conjunct, but then also it's a sign-based conjunction to his Pluto, both in Leo, right? So even though it's not a degree-based aspect, it's still notable to see that they have that resonance there. Uranus is making an opposition to his sun. So this is kind of indicative of kind of the unconventional nature maybe of their relationship, given that she's a few years older than him. So sort of breaking tradition. And just, it can indicate really, I don't know many details about them. I don't know, they're fairly private people, but that there's just something that's very interesting about their dynamic. In terms of it's kind of innovative and maybe very kind of forward thinking, because Uranus is very inventive. It has a lot, it can be kind of shocking, like I said, it's norm bending. And then the sun being Denzel Washington's, the way that he shines, it's almost like something, an energy that she exudes toward him that essentially kind of enlivens him all the more, and kind of in a more spontaneous way is kind of maybe what I can say, because Uranus is very spontaneous in that way. There's nothing you can really predict with it. So kind of having that unpredictability, maybe that maybe is what keeps the relationship interesting. Having Uranus kind of opposing the sun, there's not a monotony of just routine that becomes stale. So maybe that's part of the secret of why they've been married for 43 years, having that. I'm certainly reading into that on some level. I can't say, but that's just my best, I guess, guess. Reading what that aspect natally could mean. So between two people, a lot of ways that could manifest. Let's see here also. Her Mars is in a sign-based conjunction to both his Saturn and Venus. And so remember what I said earlier about Saturn and Venus dynamics. Denzel Washington has a natal Saturn-Venus conjunction, which here is indicating an attraction and ultimately a marriage to an older woman, a woman that's older than him, at least. So, and then that conjoined her Mars, which has to do with passion and being also that Mars is in Scorpio, which is its own sign, so it's very strong here. And then he has Venus in Scorpio, so both of them having this Venus-Mars conjunction in Scorpio, where Mars has the upper hand. But nonetheless, that's a positive thing for a relationship here to see. And then the Saturn also indicating kind of longevity, because Saturn is about time. It indicates things that last a long time, that maybe move slow, but nonetheless yield for a long time. They yield results for a long time, let's say. So, well, not a lot else to look at here that I noted between the two, but that can already be enough. The results are really just in their life, in their story. It's not the chart that's making it. So the chart is just providing a few indicators as to how their energies interact, and the proof is right there then with them. So let's see. I want to move now to my next chart example. All right, so what you're seeing here on screen is the Synastry chart of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. So now we're looking at a non-romantic relationship, more of a business career dynamic chart. Because this technique can be very useful for really anyone you meet in your life, not just a partner, romantic partner. Just if you're wanting to work with someone, you want to know who they are and how things are going to work out between you two, what energies you share. So this I figured would be a really good example, because they're two very public, very powerful figures in the world. So I think it will be interesting and very insightful to kind of get this inside glimpse to what their actual dynamic is like, that the media would never know or report on. So let's see. To start, let's see. Pluto, Trump's Pluto. Trump is the outer wheel. Oh, I'm sorry. It's the inner wheel right here. Yeah, this would be Trump's chart, and the outside is Vance. So Trump's Pluto right here is an exact conjunction to Vance's Sun. So this indicates that Vance is under pressure from Trump, who has the upper hand in this dynamic. Of course, as the president of the United States, he over the vice president. That's fairly obvious, but it's just curious that this is indicating that already within their dynamic as two people, that just may never have actually met, but the fact that they did, and then they're actually in these roles with each other, and they have this aspect shared between each other, I think is very interesting and noteworthy. So basically here, Trump sees something of value in Vance, and he identifies with his Leo energy, given that Trump is a Leo rising. So again, what I said between ascendant and suns, Vance has a Leo sun, and Trump has a Leo ascendant. So there's some synergy there, and some mutual understanding through the sign of Leo. Essentially, he identifies with something that he sees in him. This is Trump. And then Vance, on the other hand, doesn't really like the dynamic of being under the control of Trump. And though he respects him on some level, certainly, he also is likely to challenge him behind closed doors, is what I'm seeing here. It's not something you ever hear him do in a press conference or anything, but I'm sure just in any meeting in the Oval Office, this dynamic is flaring up on some level. So let's see the next aspect. We have Trump's Venus right here, making a square to Vance to Vance's Pluto, which is right down here in Libra. So, Trump likes Vance, the way he carries himself as a politician, being that Vance has Pluto in Libra, which is, you could say, the sign of the politician, the diplomat. Vance, on the other hand, doesn't necessarily like the way Trump carries himself socially, though. But there is a sort of dynamic tension that could be constructive. The square generally just, as much as there's tension, it's dynamic, and it can mean that something is emerging, something is being worked on. So it's not purely negative. Next, we have Trump's Uranus and Vance's Uranus. So right here, Trump has Uranus in Gemini, and Vance has Uranus right here in Sagittarius, making an opposition. So this indicates the initial repulsion, especially by Vance, who actually opposed Trump as a 2016 presidential candidate, as you may remember. He was one of these never Trumpers in the Republican Party. So interesting how he's flipped that and changed his mind, and it's notably really improved his career. But it doesn't necessarily hide his true feelings. Even if now maybe he's warmed up to Trump on some level, I think this still indicates that they both have opposing ideas and views, ideologies, maybe even about what progress is, or their idea of progress and how to implement policies. Uranus is, very visionary and all about implementing, new changes, usually via technology. Kind of revolutionary in that way. So they're likely to pull in opposite directions, which we may not have seen yet, but, keep in mind that we're only partway through the very first year of this 4-year term, if it even actually completes as it is. Anything could happen, especially with Uranus entering Gemini and making a conjunction to Trump's natal Uranus. Expect the unexpected. So, I think that this is a very interesting dynamic to keep in mind and to know that they have this Uranus opposition, especially with Uranus being a key player here in 2025. So definitely watch the transits with Uranus in context to their relationship and some kind of fallout that could emerge. They also probably I would say, have a different corporate interest that's backing them. Though, or it could even be the same one, but in a sense, there may be some kind of split in terms of two different interests that they, one is in favor of one more than the other. So remember, Vance is actually the Palantir man in the White House. He's essentially there because Peter Thiel wanted him there, and they managed to work that out. So, yeah, I think it's also speaking more than just them as people. The Uranus opposition speaking to the people behind them, the people that sponsor them, the people that actually enable them to get into power. So next, let's look at Vance's Jupiter right here in Capricorn, which is opposing Trump's Mercury in Cancer. So Vance is likely put off by Trump's communication style. Honestly, it comes across as brash and unsophisticated for Vance, who is a lot more strategic and tactful in the way that he communicates, because he has Mercury exalted here in Virgo. So, his speech and his manner of communicating is going to be much more sophisticated. His Mercury is is in its highest dignity. So, essentially, then, and then the whole thing about status, because he has a Capricorn Jupiter, he's more concerned with his appearance. He makes this appeal as a sort of a common people's man, like grew up poor, and appealing to a more working class crowd, and also through Christian values, which is also Jupiter, because Jupiter represents religion and spiritual beliefs. So kind of using that rhetoric more for his image. Whereas Trump pretty much just got his following by upsetting the current establishment when he got into power in 2016, or well, his whole race up to that point, and then just basically by really, really upsetting the woke leftist crowd. And so, of course, the other side of that loved every minute of it. So of course, you just polarize and essentially say everything that one side wants to hear, and you win popularity that way. So just highlighting the two different ways that they go about essentially um, creating approval ratings and getting people to support them, and just highly different styles of doing that. Okay, let's see. Next, we want to look at Vance's moon right here in Libra, making a square to Trump's Mercury again here. So this is really just speaking on the same dynamic I was just speaking about. It's a further indicator that Vance doesn't like Trump's communication style. His moon is in Libra, so he has a very tactful way about how he communicates, and maybe a little more sensitive about that, whereas Trump is just explicit about everything and very direct and brash and all that. So it doesn't sit very well with Vance. So I mean, he may just sit there quietly, but it's probably kind of a cringy experience for him, is what I'm seeing here. To listen to Trump sometimes, or most of the time. Um, Anyways, Vance's Venus is also let's see, Vance's Venus. Just lost it here for a second. Yeah, here we go. In Leo, right here, is making a sextile to Trump's Jupiter, which is here in Libra. So this is actually positive. It indicates they both share common ground. Each one presented an opportunity by the other in a way that was mutually beneficial. So essentially, the way Vance got into the White House or on the VP ticket was through, well, Trump choosing him, but he chose him via Peter Thiel supporting Trump and donating to his campaign. So there was this whole way that they worked it out that essentially was a high incentive for Trump to choose Vance as his running mate. So that was each other and gained from it. Trump got his second presidency, and Vance got to be the VP. So they obviously have to share similar ideologies and similar views to be able to make that work out. So that's the sextile there. It indicates a little bit of work need to be done, which was, and then you get a good result out of that. So now let's see. The last aspect I want to look at is Trump's Mars here in Leo is making a square to Vance's Mars in Scorpio. So this indicates a conflict of power dynamics, straight up. How they each fight, and that eventually I think it indicates that Vance will challenge Trump in a way that he's not used to being challenged, probably unexpectedly. Vance's Mars is in Scorpio, though, in its rulership. And then, well, it's more subtle and strategic, Mars and Scorpio, whereas Trump's Mars is just very bombastic and just brash and out there. Mars and Leo, pretty much it's conjunct Regulus too. So it, its style of expression is very different. Vance is going to be a lot more tactful, much more patient, really take his time to make his move and strategize a bit if he's actually ever going to challenge Trump in any way. I think that beyond just this term of presidency, I think it could indicate to Vance potentially challenging him for a presidential position in the future, perhaps. I mean, Vance is very close to potentially being the next U.S. president already with his position, so it could speak to that and some kind of tension. It's a prediction I'll make. Then I'll hold it out as an option. I'm not saying it definitely will, but it wouldn't surprise me in the least if that were to happen. Especially once Uranus, like I said, goes into Gemini, because that will bring a lot of unexpected things that no one sees coming. So this is one thing I'm saying that could be. So let's see. Right. With that, pretty much I'm going to conclude my presentation here about the astrology of synastry. So I hope that you enjoyed it and learned something today. Do remember to like and share if you did. And until next time, as above, so below, as within, as without.